Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to have a look at another ROI Dapp on the Polygon network. So as soon as I saw this one, seen a little bit of buzz around Los Simpson, and I took a look and I knew I had to talk about it. There's a few interesting things going on here which I think are worth talking about in the context of all of the ROI Dapps that we're looking and maybe some kind of signs in terms of the direction that these things are heading. So, at first glance, it's quite nice to look at. It's very different to a lot of the other layouts that we've seen, which are pretty much just kind of clones of clones and the exact same plans, the exact same layout, and even font, and just kind of with minimal changes around the color. So these guys have gone to a little bit of effort. They've put some work in to get this Los Simpson kind of writing in the Simpsons font and using Simpsons characters here. I mean, look, we're in the world of DeFi here, where you can set up Ponzi schemes, make millions of dollars, and then disappear without a trace, or in some cases, you can create coins, scam all of your investors, and then disappear without a trace and no repercussions. So, why not just break intellectual property laws as well, and just brand your site with Simpsons characters? So that's point number one. That's amusing. But look, this is very similar, even though the look and feel is quite different, and they've gone, obviously they've used their budget up on the graphic design. When we look into the contract, as we'll do very shortly, we'll see that it is pretty much a clone, the same as we've seen many times before, with a few twists and a few interesting components. So let's get into it. We'll have a look at the I guess what I'd call the code risk first, by looking at the audit and the contract itself, and then we'll have a look at the investment risk second, just to see if this is the kind of thing that is worth investing in, and if you're likely to see some returns. So Los Simpson is kicking off, I think, in about 16 hours. There we go. After I record this message, so it's not live yet. So if you're thinking about investing, it is early. Now the standout from this is other rates, and I think this says a lot because we've seen a kind of move, a progressive move in this direction of really high returns, and increasingly high returns. So this total ROI is actually really similar to what you get with other Matic Staker clones, but usually you get this kind of ROI on the daily withdrawal plan over 14 days. So, but in this case, we're now getting it over 3 days. So we're condensing the timeline, how long this thing has got to last, how long you've got to make your money back. It's basically win quickly, fail quickly. You got 3 days to see 120% return on your investment under the lowest plan. Look, as always, they've put in, or as often you see, they put in these other plans at 16% return, total ROI 150% over 6 days. Then we've got a 9-day plan and a 12-day plan. If you're looking just at the total ROI, you might be tempted by this 12-day plan. But look, in my opinion, given the fundamentals here, given the features, we're never going to see 12 days out of this, given that you'd invest 4 times in this daily plan and make way more than this total ROI. Look at this daily earning, you're only getting a third of the rate. So I think most people looking at this that spend more than 10 seconds thinking about it will realize, look, there's really only one option here, and that is Mr. Burns. 30% daily for 3 days. That's the lowest risk and the only one that I would even consider when looking at one of these plans. But yeah, 30%, I think we're seeing a trend to just faster, more of a kind of a cash grab. There are a lot of other contracts that have kind of a more sustainable outlook. And like, when you think about it, does it really matter if you're getting your ROI of 119% over 3 days or over 14 days? I mean, both are equally sustainable in a kind of a mathematical sense, because there's no underlying investment here. It's a ROI Dapp. It's a Ponzi scheme where you pay old investors from new investments. So it doesn't fundamentally change things. It's just kind of extending the time it takes to reach, really reducing the time it takes to reach failure here. But that is actually relevant in these ROI Dapps, because what you want to see is, if you're investing these as an educated person who has done the research and understands how they work, is you want to have some time for them to gain momentum. Because if the only people investing in these are the people who are investing in day one in the shortest plan, intending to get out as quickly as possible, you're not going to have an edge. You're not going to have any way of making money over what other people are putting in. So, look, I think this is a very bad sign. Let's put it mildly, for longevity here. We're not going to see this last very long, and I don't think that's the intention. So. But with that being said, let's take a look at the audit and the contract, and there's some more interesting features here. So here is the Haze crypto security audit for this contract. And the first thing to check here is that the contract address matches the one that we see linked in the contract, and it does. So that's a good sign. In terms of the issues they've called out, we have our usual ROI issue. So you should be aware. If you don't understand what this means, please educate yourself on either one of my previous videos or another video on this subject. So this is essentially saying what this is a Ponzi scheme. And so there's no underlying investment. You're basically just getting the returns from future people investing. And so the gamble that you're basically taking is that people are going to invest after you, and you're going to be able to get their money. So the more the quicker basically these periods are, the less assurance you're going to have that people are going to want to invest afterwards, because they're not going to have the opportunity to gain any momentum here. This loop optimization is usually present. It's not really a red flag, and I wouldn't really worry about it. So from their conclusions, they're saying there are no backdoors or loopholes, no issues from the Haze crypto audit. Okay, so what I think is interesting here, the only interesting thing to call out really is just this investment fee, which I think is excellent. Normally we see the investment contract owner's fee somewhere around 10%. I've seen it as high as 12%, maybe even 15%. And that's basically the percentage of your investment that just goes straight into the pockets of the devs. I would love to see this kind of at around a 3%, 5%, just generally speaking. So this is a really good thing in my opinion. But I'm just baffled why you would have such a low contract fee for a contract that is just going to burn out in a few days with a 30% daily return. It doesn't really make sense to me. On one hand, you've got an obvious kind of cash grab, and on the other hand, you've got a very low contract fee. So I applaud the contract fee, but I don't quite understand why it's so low. So the other thing to note is the referral system. So 8% is also a bit lower than these sometimes are. You sometimes get about 10%. My opinion, the lower the better for longevity. This is not too bad. 5% level 1, great. If it was up to me, I would do away with level 2 and 3 entirely and just have kind of a low level 1. This is a step in the right direction, but again, it's not really a step that makes sense to me, just given the fact that this is not going to stick around for too long. And here are our 4 plans. So we've talked about that already. They are auto-compounded, so that explains why the interest rate is so high over that period of days. It's not 3 times 30 for a simple interest. It's compound interest, which gets you to 119%. So you're locked in for that period. You can't withdraw daily. All right, let's take a look at the contract on the chain. So first thing to look out for is the transactions. And as you can see, the first transaction is just to create the source code, and you can see these errors against the subsequent transactions. And that's just a good check to make sure that there's no dodginess with people getting in and investing early before it opens up. So that is a good sign. As for the contract itself, I took a look at this and I said, that looks really familiar. I opened up Notepad++, and I happen to have AVAX Maker open from a previous video still. So I just basically compared that to Los Simpsons, and you can see it's essentially very similar. So I wouldn't say it's a clone of AVAX Maker for example, but it comes from a common fork. So there's a lot of similarities, and I think that goes some way to giving some assurance that, at least from a code perspective, there's nothing really fishy that I see here. And I've just kind of gone and had a look. You can see things like the dev fee is lower. There was nothing that came out of here that just had I guess a red flag for me as being a major issue. Most of the code is the same. I'm not a programmer, but just reading through this, I couldn't see anything that would be a red flag for me. And again, the Haze security audit is also passed. So I think, given that we've seen the same code or really similar code for other ROI apps, there's nothing here that would make me worry about the code or the security fundamentally. So next thing to check is the contract itself, and I'm just going to look at the right contract, because what we're looking for is any other weird loopholes that you might find. And in the past, we saw for, I think, Matic Vault had an option to start and stop the contract that allowed, I guess, a potential loophole for the devs and the admins to essentially stop the contract while their balance accumulated and then drain it at a later date. So there's nothing like that. There's no forced withdrawal. There's just this really simple invest and withdraw. So that's all looks pretty good. One thing I would just say is, if you are looking to interact with this contract, as I would generally recommend, directly from Polygon Scan rather than the website. So I've explained in a previous video, if you do it from the website, you watch out, because there have been instances where devs have changed the function of these buttons without any notice, and people have clicked withdraw and it has actually snoozed their withdrawal. So I lean away from actually trusting anything on the website. But just be careful if you are investing through here. Just you need to check which plan you're in. So because normally it's pretty easy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but if you can see, they've cut this down to 4 options from the 6 that was originally in the code. And if I have a look at the code where we've got plans, you can see that some of these plans are not in use. So the first 3 are not in use, and because those are the daily plans, so they haven't actually used those, they've just kind of set them to 0. And then the subsequent plans are the real plans, so plans 0, 1, 2, and then starting from plan 3. So if you just go in and assume that this is investing in plan 0, that doesn't look like it's actually 0. You can go in and to the read contract, I believe, and I'll see maybe if we can do this quickly. Get plan info for plan 0 and query that. You can see plan 0 is nothing. Plan 1 should also be nothing. I believe that happened. Yep. And you should find the same up till plan 3, where you get that daily amount. So that just means that essentially these plans are blank, and you could potentially just invest in a plan that has 0 returns if you accidentally set this flag incorrectly as 0, 1, or 2. So just be really careful if you're doing this via the contract directly and not via the website. But having said that, the withdrawals should all be fine. There's no, there's only one option here, and that's just to write to withdraw. So if you're using these features, just connect to Web3, connect your wallet in the same way as you'd normally do, and then you can interact here. And if you've got any questions about this, please see my recent video about interacting directly with the chain. All right, so that's the audit, that's the contract itself. Now I just want to spend some time looking at the actual expectations, whether this is going to be profitable, how long is it going to last. And I thought this would be an interesting case study as well, because the first thing I thought of was, well, we've got 30% daily interest. This is not going to last very long at all. And so let's just take a look at the model here for this contract, and I've put in the variables for this contract here. And note that basically, I'm assuming that everyone is in the 30% daily rate. And if we have a look down at the locked period plan calculations, you can see the compound interest rate that I get is matches the one on the website, so that calculation is correct. So I'm assuming that everyone under this model, everyone goes into the lowest rate. That's the only one that makes sense to me. If a large percentage of people go into one of these other ones, then of course you're going to get the contract lasting longer. So the other assumptions that we've had to make, this is just in here so we can talk about various plans because of various eventualities, because we don't know what the actual investments are going to be when they start. So I just wanted to look at how some potential options might look. So if we've got 100,000 Matic in daily new investments, and that is reasonably flat, and it doesn't matter what this number is, we can make it like one with a ton of zeros. You'll see it does not change the model at all. It doesn't change the end date, doesn't change, the curve obviously goes much higher for the total invested. But when we're looking at this model, we want to see that basically the contract balance, the green line, the point that hits zero is when the contract will run out of balance. So that's not affected by the total amount that's invested. What that is affected by is the amount that's invested each day relative to the previous day. So if that new investment stays flat for 100,000 or whatever that amount is over a period of time, you would expect this contract balance to last for 13 days. That's the time it would take to pay back everyone until you hit zero. And essentially the last 3 days of that, if you invest on the last 3 days, you're not getting paid. But I don't think this is a likely scenario. That's just there for illustrative purposes. But what we normally see is something a lot lower. So kind of a high first date followed by a drop off. So if we assume 100,000 on the first day, let's take a probably optimistic drop off of maybe 30%. I still think this is pretty optimistic. You don't normally get a steeper drop off. You can see how that changes things. Basically, the contract balance rises in a peak, and as soon as people can take their investment out after 3 days, that will drop really quickly. So that reduces the amount of days to 6 days that this will last. So that's kind of a second option. Option 3, which I think is the most likely, this is kind of more like what we see generally. We see like a really high day one and then a really fast drop off to practically nothing. Rare cases where a contract has a lot of momentum and a lot of hype around it, it could go for longer. You could get kind of higher investments or sustained investments as you go. Generally speaking, that's not the case, and I would usually, as a conservative estimate, put something about 50% in there. So that's basically starting with 100, then dropping to 50, then 25, 12.5, and so on. So this is what I would say is the most likely path for it to follow. And as you can see, basically, day 3, the contract hits its peak, then payments become due. And it takes about basically a day, maybe slightly longer to run out of balance. So that would put the estimate at 5 days from the beginning of the contract till it runs out of balance. Now, as I've said, there's no way of getting an edge on this because there's no daily rate. There's just the assumption that most people are going to go into the 30%. So I'm considering going into this. But I'm not too confident about it. And, the only reason I would choose to do so is just because, there is a little bit of buzz about this. And I think if you get in right at kind of hour 1 of the contract, based on this modeling, you'll probably see a return. But of course, if this daily rate, if that's minus 90%, for example, essentially what we're saying here is you only get people investing on day 1 and then it kind of drops down to 0 really quickly. You can see that curve is just going to last 3 days and then just drop. So you need to, if you're in on hour 1, you need to get your money out on day 3, hour 1 as well before that money is gone. So it's kind of, for me, it's going to come down to what time this starts. Can I get in at the beginning? I'll put kind of some sort of minor investment in and hope for the best, because I think if you get in that early, then you've probably got a good chance of getting the money back. Again, one good thing about this is the relatively low dev fee. You can see that gap between the total invested and the contract balance is only small. That's 6%. So at least I'm confident that it's not going to, if that dropped by another kind of 10%, it just really eats away at your ability to make your money back. So even if you were to get in kind of hour one, I'd still be worried. It's it's there is a possibility here, which is why I'm thinking about it for the next whatever it is, 17 hours, and maybe I'll put in a small investment and see how it goes. But look, I don't, the reason to make this video really is just to talk about this trend towards really ramping up the investment level and promising really high returns. They are, of course, not sustainable. So the only way you're going to get anything out of something like this is if you're right at the beginning and you cash out as soon as possible. There's just no margin for error here. You're not going to, you can't wait a day. You may not even be able to wait a couple of hours after your payment is due. That's basically how it works. So, summary of the risks: audit and the site itself, no concerns. The audit is passed. There's nothing in the code that is dodgy. So if you're withdrawing directly from the contract, from the contract on chain, which I'd always recommend, then you bypass any site issues, and that all seems fine. It is a clone of another app, and as far as I can tell, there's no issues. But of course, there's always the risk. We had issues with Matic King. There's been other examples where they've stuffed off the code and people have had issues when they've deposited, and the stable 1 version 1 was another one. So these things can happen. There's always a risk if you're first in on these things, and the risk is higher related to the code and being faulty, and lower in relation to the your ability to get a return on investment. So we're early. There's no uptake at the moment, so we're just speculating on what the potential uptake is going to be at this stage, because we haven't started. Profitability, I've said, is risk is low because you're expected to get more than 110% return. Big caveat on this, huge caveat, is like, if you're in right at the start, you're probably going to get some sort of return, but if you come in later, it's the chances of that really greatly diminish. As always, this is not financial advice. This is highly risky stuff. This is, you're kind of taking your life into your own hands if you put money on something that is promising 30% daily rewards. So I advise you to understand what that means for yourself and do your own research and all that kind of thing. But I would never recommend any of these other plans unless you want to lose your money, basically. So I would say, if you are considering it, only consider Mr. Burns. What else? Contract balance currently flat, and I've put the overall at medium. Basically, if you're getting in early, it's probably a medium risk. The reason it's not high is because there's nothing dodgy to what I can see around the site or the contract. It's really just if you think you're going to make that initial deposit back, and if that additional 20% returns is worth risking your investment. And look, my strategy to all of these is basically small investments on each of these. I tend to put between like 5 and 15 Matic on most of these most of these plans, and basically try to mitigate my risk and try to come out a little bit ahead on average, which I, for the most part, am successful at. But I would never kind of put all your eggs in one basket. I would not consider this a real investment, for a security or anything along those lines. It's kind of high risk, and for that reason, I always invest small amounts. All right, so that is Los Simpsons, a really interesting one in my opinion. Lots kind of to, I guess, recommend it in the low fees and in the weirdness of this kind of 30%. The intellectual property kind of use is a funny one for me. They spend so much time getting this look and feel right. But as always on these, they have misspelt staked in at least one location, and I'm just always scratching my head why they will do it in one location, but elsewhere where they've used the word staked, it's correct. So I guess this is just when you clone and then clone a clone and clone the clone again, these little spelling mistakes just kind of trickle through and never get fixed. So, staked doesn't have a C in it, and that's always amusing to me that these minor things just never get fixed in these DApps. So just another sign you're dealing with something that's not, despite how good this might look, it's not a reputable kind of thing. This is very high risk. So thanks for watching. Hopefully that's been useful information. As always, would really appreciate a like on this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to see more content, and I will see you in the next video.